ISIS, as we will call it in this video, is the acronym for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham, which in English is also known as the Levant, and for this reason also known as ISIL. The Levant is an area that includes Cyprus, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, even some of Turkey, and most notably Syria. ISIS is a jihadist terrorist group from the Middle East. The main goal is to build a caliphate in this region. A caliphate is an Islamic state led by a caliph and ruled by Sharia law. According to most sources, ISIS originated in some form back in around 2000 as one of many Al-Qaeda affiliated groups and has changed their name many times since then. Around 2006, the group became known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and by 2010 it became under the command of a 43-year-old Iraqi man named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
This is their leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, seen as a brilliant commander and tactician, battle-hardened since joining the Iraqi insurgency after the US-led invasion a decade ago.
The following years, they committed several terrorist acts in Iraqi cities, mainly against Iraqi officials or police. When the US invaded Iraq in 2003, they overthrew Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party, which was a Sunni-led government in Iraq. In short, the Islamic religion was split into two after the Prophet Muhammad's death, a Shia and a Sunni division. Almost 90% of Muslims are Sunni, with the remainder mostly from Iran, Iraq, and the Syrian regime being Shia. This makes about a third of the Middle East's population Shia Muslims, with the Sunnis spread out mostly northern half of Africa, Middle East, and parts of Asia and Oceania. After the Iraq War, the US left Nouri al-Maliki, a Shia head of state, with a Shia government in place in Iraq. This government has to some degree oppressed the Sunni minority in the country, and in short allowed for much of the anger that fueled ISIS into what it is today. The new Iraqi government, led by al-Maliki, more or less formed death squads to find and kill their former enemies, officials and allies of the previous Sunni-led government. Though asked to stop by the US, Maliki and his government continued prosecuting these people, who found groups such as ISIS to be their only defense. Many officials from the Iraqi military under Saddam Hussein can now be found in ranking positions in ISIS military, further fueling the group's power and influence across Sunnis in the country. Arguably even more important for ISIS was the Syrian uprising against President Bashar al-Assad in the spring of 2011. Sunnis in Syria make up 3/4 of the population, but is ruled by a Shia dictator who on several accounts have gassed his own people to such a degree that it has been called a genocide. The many rebels were perfect recruits for ISIS, who at the time still only operated within Iraq. They hated the oppressing Shia government and wanted their own land to control, which is exactly what al-Baghdadi and ISIS attempts to create for them. Many Arabic states are locally controlled by tribes, and the internal politics between these tribes has played a large part in forming and gaining control of the areas that ISIS has gotten. By 2013, ISIS, which before this date had just been called Islamic State of Iraq, merged with Al-Nusra Front, one of the more successful rebellious groups in the Syrian civil war. From the Syrian side of the border, ISIS were very successful and gained control of several oil fields, which has given them a large economic abilities and allowed them to surpass anything Al-Qaeda has achieved in various areas of warfare. From around the second half of 2013, they went from being just another terrorist group in the Middle East to gaining control of areas and cities, and the beginning of the formation of Islamic State had begun. In February of 2014, Al-Qaeda disavowed ISIS on the basis of brutality, which happened after an 8-month-long power struggle, though others report that the reasons behind the split has more to do with power and control of Syria and the region generally than the brutality of ISIS. However, there is no doubt that al-Baghdadi's Al-Qaeda in Iraq was among the most brutal of the Al-Qaeda affiliates, and is no less brutal since it split from Al-Qaeda. Since then, ISIS has taken over more and more of Iraq, and have in the beginning of October even fought on the Turkish side of the border. By summer 2014, they simply called themselves Islamic State and control a very large part of eastern Syria and of the northern Iraq, which has more Sunni majority areas than the rest of Iraq. ISIS has been very good at recruiting Muslims from other parts of the world, including many Europeans, especially through the use of social media. However, some Syrian rebel groups still fight against both Assad's regime and ISIS in Syria, and there still exists huge opposition to ISIS in most of Iraq and the nearby nations. In September 2014, the US started bombing ISIS, with a large coalition of both Western and Middle Eastern countries included. For more information on finances, behavior of ISIS towards civilians, and analysis of their relationship towards Assad's regime and other nearby groups and forces, follow some of the links in the description below. That was what you need to know about ISIS. Thanks for watching.